Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to this Institute of Economic Affairs Liberal Vision Fringe meeting on the topic, why aren't the Liberal Democrats more liberal? My name's Mark Littlewood. I'm the Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs, and we've left you some information about us on each seat. In a different life, indeed now feels like a parallel universe, I used to work for the Liberal Democrats as the head of media as well. In addressing the issues about why the LibDems perhaps aren't as liberal as they might be, we're focusing principally today on lifestyle freedoms, civil liberties, not principally on economics. I only arrived in Glasgow at this conference a couple of hours ago, but already I've seen on the back of my accreditation some campaign to prevent me gambling in the way I want to. There was a whole crowd of people who were running the plain packs on tobacco campaign who were in my reception, so they want to regulate what colour schemes I'm about to look at. On the upside, however, going through security, I was given this great plastic bag and I didn't have to pay 5p for it. So there have been. I've already had some good experiences since arriving here today. Just sort of a few housekeeping points. If you've got a mobile telephone or an electronic device that might make an irritating sound, I'd be really grateful if you could switch it off or switch it to silent. Secondly, to let you know that we're videoing the event today, so if you do ask a question, you may very well be captured on video, and that will be going up on the IEA website within about the next 24 hours. And finally, to let you know that we've only got a few copies left of this, but if you're interested in the IEA publication, 8 years since the Orange Book, although we should really reprinted it to call it 9 years since the Orange Book, then there are a few copies left of this which are on sale at the back. This is an issue of our Economic Affairs Journal, which is almost entirely dedicated to analysing the history of the Liberal Party, the alliance of the Liberal Democrats, and particularly looking at the impact the Orange Book has had on the Liberal Democrats. There's a few of those left at the back. Let me introduce our star-studded panel today in the order in which they are going to speak. On my far right is Christopher Snowdon. Chris works with me at the Institute of Economic Affairs and is our Director of Lifestyle Economics. He is the author of The Art of Suppression, The Spirit Level Delusion, and Velvet Glove, Iron Fist. His work focuses on pleasure, prohibition, and dodgy statistics. Other people's, I should say. And he's authored a number of publications for the IEA, including Sock Puppets, Euro Puppets, The Proof of the Pudding about fat tax, The Crack Cocaine of Gambling, ? That's particularly about fixed spotted betting terminals, which you'll find on the back of your conference pass. And more recently, Free Market Solutions in Health. Speaking second will be Stephen Toole. Stephen's the editor of the Liberal Democrat Voice website, blog, I don't know what you call it, website, which must be the most read LibDem website on the internet. He's also a research associate for Centre Forum and development director for the Education Endowment Foundation and a regular commentator on Liberal Democrat affairs, not just on LDV but also on the wider media. Speaking third is Jeremy Browne, the Liberal Democrat Member of Parliament for Taunton Deane. He's been the MP for Taunton since 2005, has been a Minister of State at the Home Office since 2012 and was previously a Liberal Democrat Minister at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. As well as his parliamentary and ministerial responsibilities, Jeremy is Vice President of the charity Parkinson's UK and a member of the advisory board of the think tank Reform. And last but by no means least, we're joined by Emma Carr, who is the Deputy Director of the civil liberties group Big Brother Watch. She joined as Director in February 2012, has worked for various political campaigns and research groups in the UK. She's been actively involved in politics at university, has been a regional chairman for Conservative Future. We're all small L Liberals on the panel, there was no guarantee it was big L Liberal Democrat on the panel. She regularly features on radio and TV, has appeared on the Today programme Daybreak, Al Jazeera, Woman's Hour, and many others. So please join me in welcoming our panel for this evening. Housekeeping point for our speakers. I've asked each speaker to speak for about 5 minutes each. If they run beyond 6 minutes, I'll start tapping this, and if they run much beyond 7 minutes, I'll start tapping this continually until they sit down. Chris, can you go first?
Thank you, Mark. Hello, everybody. I'm just going to say a few words about. I'm just going to say a few words about sort of micromanagement of people's personal lives, eating, drinking, smoking, gambling, and so on. Sort of what I call the Nanny State issues. And it should be said first of all that the LibDems by no means have the monopoly on this sort of liberalism. And so I suppose the first question is really, why is it that all the parties are not as liberal as they could be on these issues? I'm inclined to go along with the argument that since the 1980s and the end of the big left-right struggle, that politicians have become managers in public life, managers of public services, and that this does not give politicians the sense of mission and the sense of heroism that they otherwise would have from the big ideological battles. And so instead they are very drawn to policies that are based around supposedly public health, where they can be seen as saving thousands of lives, and something probably saving the planet probably serves the same purpose. And that change has come about at the same time when we've seen the death, or at least the severe incapacitation of the left libertarian, to be replaced with the liberal left, which is a rather different thing. So whereas you would used to have had the traditional, maybe the trade unionist, the working class spokesman, who would often be actually quite socially conservative, but would have no problem with the working man having a pint and a flutter and a fag. That's been turned on its head, and now you have people, usually quite a metropolitan elite, who are socially extremely progressive, in fact achingly so, and desperate for you to know that they are very unsexist and unracist and homophobic, but at the same time almost take pride in their intolerance of lifestyles that people have chosen and that we're not born with. But it seems to me, although I obviously agree with the agenda of being non-sexist, non-homophobic, non-racist, that to be liberal in the live and let live sense of the word, certainly you have to be happy for people to sleep whatever they want. It seems to me you should also be happy for people to eat and drink whatever they want as well. And that's where the concept of public health, which is at the root of the lifestyle regulation agenda, comes in. And if I can give you this is more or less off the top of my head, but no doubt a heavily abridged list of policies that have been doing the rounds in public health over the last few months. We see things like obviously minimum pricing for alcohol, black packaging for tobacco, 20% tax on fizzy drinks, a fat tax, a sugar tax, a fine for not being a member of a gym, graphic warnings on bottles of alcohol, banning parents from taking their kids to school by car, a ban on gambling machines and betting shops, a ban on smoking in cars, a ban on anyone born after the year 2000 ever buying tobacco, a ban on the sale of hot food to children before 5 p.m, a ban on multi-bag packs of crisps, a complete ban on alcohol advertising, a ban on electronic cigarettes, a ban on menthol cigarettes, a ban on large servings of fizzy drinks, and a complete ban on advertising of any product whatsoever to children. Now, you'll notice one word keeps reappearing in that list, and that's ban, 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 ban. And I would argue that the public health lobby, so-called, is today at least inherently illiberal. But for the reasons I've given, it nevertheless appeals to parties across the board. How do the parties compare? Well, I mean, the signals from Labour at the moment is that they will, if they get in 2 years' time, they will capitulate to every demand of the British Medical Association. And having been against both minimum pricing and plain packaging, they seem very keen on them now. It would be difficult, I suppose, for them to do a U-turn on it, although I guess Cameron did, with the minimum pricing. And if Dan Abbott gets their hands anywhere in their health, I think they will go a hell of a lot further. She's talking about all sorts of bans. Andy Burnham talked about banning Frosties, and so on. The Tories, meanwhile, continue to be torn between their belief in paternalism and belief in individual freedom. And though they have, for the time being, rejected minimum pricing and plain packaging, it wasn't exactly rejected on the basis that this goes against our firmly held principles in intellectual property and allowing the market to decide the price of things. It was done apparently more or less on the basis that they weren't sure that there was enough evidence it would work in public health terms, and that they weren't sure it was going to be very popular with the electorate, which is something I'll return to. You would hope that a stronger voice against this would be coming from the party that has the word Liberal in its name, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Last year at conference it was taxing fizzy drinks, this year it's taxing plastic bags. The way to win back voters' hearts is to make their shopping slightly more expensive. Mark's already mentioned this thing, which I've been forced to wear around my neck for the last 24 hours, despite vociferously disagreeing with it. Now, I realise this is only a commercial relationship between this campaign and the Lib Dems, but nevertheless, I hope I'm not alone in seeing the irony of hundreds of Liberals walking around with an advert to ban something around their neck for the best part of the week. I also heard, I don't know how serious this was, that the Lib Dems intended on banning cars by the 2040. Minimum pricing seems to be largely in favour of plain packaging again. In fact, anything to do with smoking, no matter how absurd, seems to go down quite well with the Liberal Party. And you know, if this is liberalism, then God help us if the paternalists ever get in, you know, let alone the authoritarians. And my plea to you, I suppose, is to say, are these things really vote winners? I suspect that a lot of this is very much part of the Westminster bubble and the metropolitan elite thinking these things are A, essential and B, popular, when it's not necessarily the case. But even if they are, you can't outflank the Labour Party on these issues. But if you took a more socially liberal position, as I would see it, then it would be very easy to outflank the Conservative Party. So I think there is a gap in the market for a party that is socially liberal. And I think that's actually quite a bit of survey evidence to say that younger people today tend to be more broadly libertarian. The personal popularity of Nigel Farage seems to have a lot more to do with this sort of devil-may-care attitude towards having a pint in the fag with him, doesn't necessarily his policies on Europe. Minimum pricing in particular was never shown to be popular with the majority of people in opinion polls. The fact that in Denmark was extremely unpopular, and that's why it was ditched. So I think there is a gap in the market. I think that market will grow over time. And in conclusion, I would say that I agree with the LibDem who said in 2010, for too long, laws have taken away your freedom, interfered with your life, and made it difficult for businesses to get on. That was Nick Clegg back in the days when he was still popular. He continued. This government is going to transform our politics, so the state has far less control over you. We'll get rid of the unnecessary laws, and once they're gone, they won't come back. It sounds to me like an excellent idea.
Yes, thank you. Stephen.
Thank you, I'm going to stand up, if I may. And it's great to actually speak as an IEA fringe, so thank you very much for inviting me, not least because I sometimes get a reputation within the Lib Dems for being on the right of the party, and it's great to come here and be reassured that I'm a complete raving lefty to Mark Littlewood, even though I'm on his right, physically speaking today. I'm talking, and you don't realise, by the way, that you're the only people who have those red ones. We just did it to really annoy you. Everyone else has voted badges. But what I'm going to focus on in my 5 minutes, 4.5 minutes now, is the Leveson Inquiry, because actually I think it's a really interesting case study in the liberalism of the Lib Dems and whether we are truly liberal. And I'm going to challenge the premise of the question, why are the Lib Dems not liberal? We are. We're just a bit erratic and inconsistent with how we apply that liberalism in reality. We've just come from celebrating porn and from referring back a motion that sought to filter pornography and to take away the rights of parents to have proper conversations, adult conversations with their kids in a way that would allow for a mature discussion of relationships. So it shows that the Lib Dems can, when we discuss it in a mature adult way, stick up for something that is liberalism, and even perhaps the kind of libertarianism of the IEA flavour. We've also got secret courts, where again the Lib Dems, at least the party membership, if not always the party leadership, stood up for the liberal cause there. And of course on the Snoopers Charter, again it was Lib Dems making the running. So to suggest that it's not always the Liberal Democrats who are liberal is wrong, but Leveson, press freedom, vital issue to me. Vital issue to me. We cannot, as a party, stand up and say we don't believe that the state should regulate when it comes to secret courts or to any of these other issues, but when it comes to what you can read and what you can write, then Parliament, MPs, have a right to intercede and to appoint a regulator. That is not the sort of thing that when you are trying to export freedom and democracy to the rest of the world, a liberal country can stand up and say, ah yes, but sometimes our journalists go a bit faster, we want to have the chance to regulate them if we can. So I would say that on press freedom, there should be a no ifs, no buts rule. And it's difficult. It's difficult because we are, as a party, committed to fighting for the underdog. And we saw those underdogs, and I'm not talking about the celebrities, I'm not talking about Hugh Grant and Sienna Miller and all the rest of it. I'm talking about Chris Jeffries, I'm talking about McCanns, who were trounced by the press in a quite disgusting way. And I understand why people would take the side of those who oppose Rupert Murdoch as opposed to Rupert Murdoch himself. That's understandable. But sometimes liberalism is about supporting the most unlikely people as well. And in this case, that does mean journalism. And journalism means the exposing of public wrongdoing wherever it is found. And the moment you start letting government into making that decision, that's when you're on a very slippery slope indeed. We cannot allow any form of regulation of the press if we want to maintain our reputation as a defender of democracy and of freedom of speech, freedom of thought. So that's my contention, that we need to keep those red lines. I think also we need to be honest about following the money here. Who buys the newspapers? We do. And we just had this debate on porn. And the whole point was that actually you don't stop something just by banning it. You drive it underground. And the same thing is true when it comes to press freedom as well. We should not be the regulators appointed by, you should not appoint government to be the regulators. It is us who must be the regulators. If you don't want to read the kinds of newspapers that print the kind of trash that got printed, fine, don't. And let's make sure the rest of the public doesn't either. But to get government set up as the regulator on our behalf is something that is paternalistic, it is illiberal, and it is something that Liberal Democrats should be very wary of indeed. I have two fundamental principles when it comes to press freedom. The state should not have power over the press, and the press should not have power over the individual. Leveson got one thing right, and that was to put in place a process of low-cost arbitration to make sure that you don't have to have £250,000 in your bank account in order to take Rupert Murdoch or the Daily Mail or whoever else it might be to court. It should be something that can be settled without expensive libel lawyers. That's the kind of regulation that we can have and that can be voluntary and enforced and done well. What we cannot have is having government set up. You have the BBC Trust, Lord Patton, nice guy, but a Conservative. You have Ofcom, Steve Richards, who is the ex-political advisor to Tony Blair. The idea you can have independent self-regulation might sound nice, independent always sounds nice as a word, but it doesn't mean it in reality. The only guarantor we have of our freedoms as individual citizens is that you have the right to think, to write, and to say what you'd like. And that's something that Liberals should defend, even if we don't like the people saying it.
Stephen, thank you. Jeremy, we're very liberal. You can stand or seat and choose.
Might change my mind halfway through. Well, good evening, everyone. I've sort of observed the Labour Party in my lifetime as having decided that you cannot achieve the perfect society through economic redistribution, and so instead they're going to achieve the perfect society through identifying everything they dislike and banning it on the basis that what's left must represent perfection. And they are now quite deeply illiberal party in the home affairs area, so Labour want more DNA retention for people who have been convicted of crime, they want more CCTV surveillance on ID cards, etc., etc. The Conservatives, I agree with the analysis, veer a bit between paternalism and liberalism, and even David Cameron himself, early on in his tenure as Conservative leader, was talking, for example, of whether shops like WH Smith should be told where the confectionery should be displayed in their stores so it doesn't tempt people to buy chocolate because they might eat too much of it. And that leaves us as a party, and I want us to be an unambiguously liberal party, partly because of ideological conviction and partly because I think it's actually in our wider electoral and political interest. I observe this, that we have become a much more liberal country over the course of the last 40, 50, 60, 70 years. And yet the Liberal Party, us, are currently on about 8 or 9% in the opinion polls. And actually, I'm not even making a point about our current circumstances. In the general election, we got 22, 23%. It is nevertheless still strange that in a society where the political ideology that has been most dominant and which has most driven backwards the other political ideologies in the last 50 years, liberalism, hasn't seemed to generate as much support as you might think for the party that is meant to be espousing the dominant ideology of our times. How comes we keep finishing third when more and more people are liberals and have liberal preferences? I think that is partly because we can be eclipsed by the other parties. So New Labour is about the Labour Party trying to take some of our ground, liberal conservatism is about the Conservatives trying to take some of our ground, and we have the difficulty that any sort of marketplace, that if you're the third biggest player, the first and second biggest player can take some of your best ideas and best tunes. But I don't think it is entirely due to that. I think it is in part because we have been inconsistent in espousing liberalism ourselves. And I'm not talking about the current parliament or the party leader, I'm talking about us collectively as a party over the 25 years that I've been a member. And if you look at the 4 areas, social liberalism, economic, constitutional, personal, social liberalism, I think is one area where the party feels comfortable. We have a long track record where there's great Victorian reformers of universality of education and public libraries, but even policies like the pupil premium are a sort of modern manifestation of that form of, if you like, interventionist liberalism. Is the form of liberalism that often I think conference feels most comfortable about, but it's also the form of liberalism which places the greatest role in the hands of the state, and therefore you could argue the least liberal strand of the 4 strands of liberalism. But nevertheless, that is a form, recognisable form of sort of active social liberalism, which the party feels comfortable with. I'm supportive of it as well. It's not really a contentious issue. The other one that isn't contentious is the sort of constitutional liberalism. Everyone supports House of Lords reform. The public aren't that interested in it, but it is a form of liberalism about empowering people, which the party feels, I think, comfortable with. So social liberalism tick, constitutional liberalism tick. The other 2 areas, I think, are commitment to liberalism is more ambiguous. On economic liberalism, I can't recall the last time I saw a motion at conference which was critical of the party leadership for showing insufficient interest in enterprise, wealth creation, innovation. We seem at best ambiguous about a business becoming successful, employing more people. Sometimes we actually sound like we're quite uncomfortable, that we must find ways to demonstrate our disapproval of people becoming wealthy and successful and creating jobs in our economy. I'm personally not enthusiastic about a 50p tax rate. With the 1p national insurance contribution that goes through the system, actually we would end up where for every pound a person made over a certain threshold, the state took more money from that individual than left that individual to spend for themselves. And I'm uncomfortable with the notion of the state feeling that it more than co-owns your marginal income. That is your income. Everyone recognises that a tax system, a progressive tax system, is necessary to support good quality public services, but penalising wealth creation in a way that feels slightly covetous, I am nervous about that being an instinct of our party, and I don't think it is a liberal instinct. And finally, I suppose this is the main point of the gathering this evening, personal liberalism. We are hyper-vigilant about civil liberties, and no doubt we will hear more about that from Emma, but I think our record as a party is pretty good, although it's always difficult to satisfy all audiences. Where I am uncomfortable, and I echo some of the comments made, is I think our commitment to personal freedom in terms of the choices we make as individuals could be and should be more robust. And I'm one of 3 LibDem MPs who didn't vote for the smoking ban, and the other 2 were Mark Oaten and Lembit Opic, so I don't know if that was really our position. But it wasn't because I'm in favour of smoking, or I'm in favour of smoky pubs, or I'm in favour of my clothes smelling of smoke. It's because I felt that individuals can make a choice about where they chose to eat and drink, and businesses can make a choice about how they try to attract customers to their restaurants or pubs. And I am not enthusiastic, for example, about fat taxes. I think I should be able to decide for myself whether I wish to eat a hamburger or not without someone in London deciding that they know more about my diet than I do. And I don't smoke. I used to. I stopped about 15 years ago. But I tend to think that if people do wish to smoke, that is a decision that they can make. And I felt with minimum unit alcohol pricing that a policy which said that a person on higher income who drank a bottle of Chablis every evening would be completely unaffected, but a person on lower income who drank a bottle of Lambrini every evening, we would show our moral middle class disapproval for that type of feckless behaviour by making it more expensive for them. For me, that felt like an excessively intrusive and interfering position to take. So I think the question for us as a party is we have a lot of liberal instincts. I think we have more liberal instincts than the other parties, but I think we can be a bit inconsistent in the application of our instincts. And as a result, like any business, any organisation, any charity that is trying to make a pitch to an audience, if you confuse your own message or you have ambiguity in your messages, I think it makes it harder for the audience to understand at an instinctive level what you represent. And at an instinctive level, surely the best thing for us to represent is liberalism.
Jeremy, many thanks. Emma.
So, in terms of civil liberties, we've so far covered intrusions in terms of our lifetime, our lifestyle freedoms. Talked about our press freedoms in terms of Leveson. I think somebody mentioned intrusions in the political freedoms, so the lobbying bill, a bill that if you're an organisation and you spend more than 5k a year, that basically includes expressing any form of political opinion, you're going to have to sign up to the Electoral Commission, a situation that both Polly Toynbee agrees with Guido Fawkes and 38 Degrees agrees with the Taxpayers Alliance, so I don't know if we'll ever get that situation again on what a bad bill it actually is. We talked about secret courts and intrusion on our legal freedoms. Again, a situation where you can be in court and have evidence put against you, you will not hear the evidence and you have no chance to rebut it. And I think that's probably the most illiberal thing you can possibly do in what we call a democracy. So I guess I'm here to talk about the internet freedoms, and I know that in your conference today you talked about internet filtering and about how to tackle child safety and the issue of pornography, and it's an incredibly difficult issue, and it's a very important debate that we have, but what I will say on that is that it's incredibly important we don't take the freedoms of choice away from parents. What we need to do is we need to empower them. We need to work with the internet service providers and the telecommunications companies to make sure parents have an understanding of the way that the internet works, what is on the internet and how to protect their children, and so they can make a choice about what they are happy with their children seeing on and offline. And unfortunately, we've stopped talking about it in a sensible and productive way. What I feel incredibly uncomfortable with is somebody within the government or a quango being set up who's going to sit and decide what is adult content, what is going to be part of this network filtering. And I think the majority of people who have an understanding of the internet far more than I have come out and said it's unbelievably easy to circumvent a network filter. And so we're lulling parents into a false sense of security if we say, okay, you've opted out of being able to see adult content, therefore your children are completely safe online, and we could have an incredibly difficult situation from the run of that if children in any way harmed get to see that content. They're a lot more sophisticated than their parents in terms of knowing how to circumvent these things. I think anyone who's been at school and has seen Facebook being filtered, they know how easy it is to circumvent those filters. So from a Big Brother Watch's point of view, a device level filter, putting the power back in the hands of parents and education in the hands of parents is incredibly important. So I'm primarily here, I think, to talk about the Communications Data Bill, aka the Snoopers Charter. And there's an incredible amount that can be said about that, but I'll keep it short. I think what the LibDems could have done in that situation, being one of the only parties who have really come out against it, is they could have asked for a lot more justification about why it was being put before the House in the first place. It was based on situations where GCHQ and Civics in general could say we absolutely need this and evidence wasn't heard. We now know because of some of the allegations that Ed Snowdon's made, what's come out about PRISM, GCHQ and the NSA, that a lot of things are already happening in terms of policing the internet, getting data from the internet. It's not the Wild West that it was sold to us to be. The UK gets more information from Skype in terms of data than any other country in the world. We're the third highest from Facebook after America and India, and we had people saying it's absolutely impossible to get this data at the moment, which was a complete and utter untruth. And it shouldn't take US companies to come out with these surveillance transparency reports to show that that was an untruth. I'm not going to say lie, I'm going to say untruth. So we also have to think about the international precedent that this is setting. We've talked about Leveson and about press freedoms, but this sets internet freedoms. I think William Hague's doing an incredibly good job at the moment talking about China, Iran, other countries like that, and their attitude to the internet and to blocking. If we have a situation where we're indiscriminately gathering everybody's communications, I don't entirely see how that's different. We have infinite resources. So we don't have infinite resources. We have a situation where we should be tackling head-on the people that are going to cause harm to this country or committing crimes. And this bill would have explicitly prevented viewing content and listening to phone calls, which is exactly what you want the surveillance services to do and the police to do. If they have information that leads you to suggest that they are committing a crime or they're going to cause harm to the UK, and this would have stopped that. And that's not what you want. You want the £2 billion that was going to be put towards this bill being spent on the skills, training and technology that's going to help the security services to do their job properly, not creating black boxes that the telecommunications companies are going to have, and the bureaucracy behind that. So it's not just civil liberties organisations that think this. Bernard Hogan Howe, when he was asked in a parliamentary committee how he would spend the £2 billion, he said skills, training, technology and more police on the streets. And that's exactly the situation that we need to get into. We're getting the data, there's other ways to speed it up, there's more that needs to be done in terms of identifying individual computers and mobile phones. We're certainly not there yet, but this bill was far too widely published. It wasn't going to effectively tackle the problems in which it was going to tackle, and I think that's the majority of the things that we've talked about in terms of Leveson, the lobbying bill, secret courts. It's not directly tackling what we set out to tackle. And so this is one of the problems that I think that we have, and I'll stop there.
Thank you very much.